All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being with us tonight. My name is Allison, pronouns are she, her. I'm the executive director of the Gallatin County Democrats. I'm honored tonight to be able to moderate and facilitate a conversation with two of our Gallatin Democratic representatives, Representative Ed Stafman from Senate District 60 or House District 62. Whew, it's Friday. And Representative Kelly Kortum from House District 65. Before we get started with the program, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the gratitude we have towards the many indigenous nations we call this valley their homelands. Many thanks to the Blackfeet, Crow, Shoshone, and others who have lived here since time immemorial and protected the waters, land, air, and animals. May we proceed with the spirit of respect and generosity that these nations have displayed. And credit to Dr. Shane Doyle, who shared that lands acknowledgement with us and gave us permission to use it. So welcome. Thank you all for being here. We've had conversations over the last few nights with our elected Democrats in the legislature, and tonight is our final conversation. We'll be talking, the title is Access and Equality, but last night we came up with a better phrase, which is social engineering. That's the phrase that has started to bubble up, and I think that's great. So we'll be talking about that. But the first question that I will kick off with, and we'll start with Representative Stafman. What is the biggest surprise for you so far this session?
Well, thanks, Allison, and it's great to be with you all. I think for me, the biggest surprise was I didn't realize what a bubble we live in Bozeman and how different the rest of the state is, radically so, except Bozeman, Missoula, and to some extent, Helena. And we are not liked. It's kind of part of the owning the libs. So it is, that Bozeman is seen as very much other. And then, I've also a second related surprise is, we have 9 legislators from Gallatin County, 5 Dems and 4 Rs. And the 4 Rs are among the most right-wing legislators in the legislature, all 4 of them. And I wouldn't have thought that in Gallatin County we would have such extremism, but we do, and that was also a real surprise to me.
Thank you for that. There was another answer that you had to that question a little second ago, and I think you should also share that.
Oh, just that I'm surprised that I made it through this far. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
And that's an honest answer, and I really appreciate that. You all are human just like the rest of us, and it's been a brutal session so far. So you're still here, and we're grateful for that. Kelly, what about you?
Thanks, Allison. I too am shocked to have survived this long. The last 2 weeks were just absolutely bonkers. 12 hours of Zoom calls a day just to do the normal business, and then you have the planning outside of that. The pace is crazy, and I'm truly shocked that our government functions at all when you pack it all into just a wild 3 or 4 months. I bet there's a better way to do it, and I would happily engage in conversation, in a couple of months about how that would work. So that was pretty shocking, is just how this very official institution operates on such a breakneck pace. I guess that's my answer.
Great, thank you. So feel free to ask questions. You can raise your hand, you can wave at me, or you can use the reactions on the menu bar to raise your hand, and I'll call on you, or if you want to post them in the chat. Could you remind us what committees you serve on, and maybe just a quick summary of maybe some of the themes that you've seen in those committees the first half of this session. So Kelly, I'll start with you.
I am on the State Administration and Veterans Affairs Committee. That's my big committee. We meet 5 times a week. Often hears about pensions, voting rights, how the state runs itself, really. It's my favorite committee. It's really important. And we do some good work in there, and everybody's pretty friendly, I would say, on that committee. I will say the theme in that one is bills coming that restrict voting rights and make fewer people vote from the Republicans that pass, and bills that Democrats bring that expand voting rights or protect voting rights that end up failing, which is disappointing. But that's where the numbers are this cycle. My second committee is Energy, Telecom, and Federal Relations. It's a much smaller committee. There's only 4 Democrats on it, including myself and Rep. Heyman. And that one has been heavy on energy policy and renewables this year. A little bit of telecom and a little bit of federal relations, but just a whole bunch of generation and carbon and the whole deal. They're definitely aiming to repeal some of our renewable standards, and that's a bit disturbing, and they are flying through. I believe they passed the House with at least 2 bills in that realm. Then my last committee is local government, and that is a really fun committee and not what I expected at all. The theme we're getting right now this year is some locals will find a dysfunction in their local government in a couple of counties, and then they'll try to change the rules for the rest of the state, therefore screwing up the other 50 odd counties that have been functioning just fine. So there's a real important balance between a state government mandate that affects all the local governments and local control, and that's something we're having some conversations with across the aisle right now, is whose role is most important. So I guess that's my long answer on my 3 committees and what I'm seeing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. What about you, Rabbi Ed?
Well, I only have 2 committees, but they're 2 big committees. I'm on Judiciary, and we have actually 3 of the 4 Republicans from Gallatin County are on that with me. I'm the only Dem from Gallatin County on that. It is what they call a kill committee because it's stacked with the most right-wing Republicans. And so that's where they send things when it's part of the high priority, either to kill or to pass of the far right. And then I'm on Health and Human Services, which is also got those not the same 3, but 2 of those 3, and then the 3 Republicans also from Gallatin County. Not this. Remember, there are 4, so I got 3 on each committee, but not the same 3. And that one isn't quite as extreme because we do have a few moderate Republicans on that committee, unlike Judiciary, and we've actually been able to stop some things there. We've stopped a few things on Judiciary, but only when we've exposed it as being just beyond outrageous. So on Judiciary is where you get all the big stuff. It's the anti-trans kids bills all came through Judiciary. The limiting government's ability to regulate vaping, actually that came through Health and Human Services. A lot of the taking away powers from our local health departments came through Judiciary. All the anti-abortion stuff came through Judiciary. Just about all, I'm going to say 75% of the bills that are really headlines come through Judiciary. And it's been hard to stop them. I had 3 of my own bills that all got tabled in Judiciary. One would have abolished the death penalty. One would have clamped down a bit on militias participating in rallies, pretending to be law enforcement or exercising authority. And the third was called the Montana Racial Justice Act, which would have given remedies for racial discrimination in the judicial system. but all three of my bills got tabled. I also had two bills in Kelly's committee, in the Energy Committee, one of which would have saved ratepayers $200 million and reduced 35% of Northwest Energy's carbon output. And it was just a great bill, but they sort of laughed me out of there. And I also had a couple of bills in state administration, one bill in state administration, which is a pandemic preparedness bill, and that's still alive. They haven't voted on it yet, but I'm optimistic that one will come out.
I'm listening to this government thing. Do you want to?
So that's some of the stuff I've been dealing with. I'm proud that I did personally kill one bill, and that was a bill that would have declared Antifa a terrorist organization in Montana. And it was a beautiful thing to see, but it's a small accomplishment, and I'll take it.
We'll take any win that we can get this session. And there have been quite a few wins, and I think that it's important to remember that there have been some bad things that have been stopped, not everything, but there have been some bad things that have been stopped, and there's some good things that are moving forward too. I certainly sometimes have a hard time remembering that there are things that are good that are happening, mostly because of the bills that you've been hearing in the judiciary, that like just the onslaught of those terrible bills that really have no bearing on most Montanans or the economy, or actually help people. They're all this social engineering that I was talking about earlier. That's
like 90% of what we hear.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for the first bill that creates jobs or deals with infrastructure, or the best bill the Democrats had, I think, was Kelly's bill. It was a great bill, and somehow he pulled some magic to get it past the committee and to the House floor, and then it passed second reading, and then suddenly they caught on that it was a good bill, and then totally by surprise. I'm sure Kelly could tell you more about it than me. I was shocked to see it was just mind blowing to see how it got reversed on third reading. But that was really one of the best bills that came out of the Democratic caucus.
I completely agree. So Kelly, talk about that bill.
Thank you, Ed and Allison. The bill would have allowed municipalities to build or to extend their broadband networks. There's currently a law that prevents cities from competing with private companies to get you internet service, but it hasn't been working. There are lots of small towns that barely have any service at all, and there are some larger towns that have a zone where it's not profitable for those big companies to roll out internet service. So there's a lot of people underserved here in Montana, and this bill would have helped allowed for the municipalities to take out a contract to put in new lines and then rent or lease access to that to the internet service providers to get those people internet. I got a Republican came in and amended it in committee, which helped it tremendously, and which is why it was so initially popular. Is the Senator Galloway from Great Falls said, well, let's keep private industry involved here too, and make sure all parties are happy. And he amended it, and I agreed with the amendment, and it passed out of committee, I believe, 16-1. So despite objections from the telecom lobbyists, it did pretty well in committee and on the House floor. I think that's when the lobbyists started taking me more seriously. As you saw, that vote in 24 hours went from, I think, 68 to 32 to the opposite. Oh, just so quickly. It was a little bit shocking. I kind of expected the resistance to happen earlier, but I will point out that it lets us know how much power lobbyists have over the end votes. And as citizens of Montana, we should be concerned that a lot of that legislation is being written not with all of our interests in mind, but a particular interest, we'll say. And pretty clear indication of that there. So I guess at least we learned a lesson from it. And hopefully we can, the other Democratic jobs and infrastructure bills will make it through for farther, because as Rabbi Ed said, they've been talking a lot about jobs, but we're not seeing any of the bills or legislation on the matter. So we'll see if they come out in the next month or two.
You know, one thing that Kelly, he mentioned a representative by the name of Galloway. And that reminded me that Representative Galloway and his wife, who's also a representative, are landlords. And in judiciary, we've seen 4 or 5 bills, but some of them have multiple parts. So all in all, there's about 8 or 9 bills, all of which have passed through the House, every one of which shifts the relationship between landlords and tenants way to the side of landlords. Montana already had one of the most biased landlord-tenant laws in the country that is in favor of landlords. All of these bills had been passed in previous sessions and vetoed by Governor Bullock. And they brought all of them back. And now you can be evicted for being, quote, verbally abusive to your landlord. That's just one of the many, many changes. You can be required to pay for a whole new plumbing system because you put toilet paper in the toilet, and it's a 50-year-old plumbing system that blows up. Stuff like this, it's quite shocking. And you know it's part of a bigger picture of where we have quite a few Republican legislators who have come to line their pockets. So we have landlords who are basically there moving the law more in favor of landlords. You know, we have vape shop owners. There are 3 vape shop owners on that one bill against at least 50, maybe 100 health professionals of every health organization in the state. And the vape shop owners won. And they're there just to line their own pockets. And one of them's a legislator. We have a dentist from Gallatin County who runs a whole bunch of legislation that will line the pockets of dentists. We've managed actually to defeat most of those. And it's not that dentists are bad people, but there's a lot of bills that seek to move the yardsticks on fairness between one group and another. And many of those, and in the legislature, there are no ethics rules to speak of. All you need to do if you're going to profit by a bill is to say, I have a financial interest in this. And then you go on and you can do whatever you want, vote for it, lobby for it, whatever. I personally have served on ethics boards for rabbis, at the hospital. I'm still on the hospital ethics board. I've been on lawyers' ethics boards, and I have never seen corruption in my life as I've seen in the legislature. And it's all allowed. It's not as if it's done secretly. It's right out in the open. And so many legislators run because either they've got an industry that they want to make richer, or they have a pet peeve, like our legislator from Manhattan, who has been a leading anti-vaxxer in past sessions and was unable to get anything through. And this time she didn't get all of it through, but she got a bunch of anti-vax legislation through, at least through the House. And that's, she ran basically because, she doesn't believe in vaccines, and she wants to protect the so-called freedom of people who don't believe in vaccines. And so there's a lot of that, a lot of people there who come from that perspective of a particular issue, or usually a financial issue, that they want to advance.
Call it when you see it. Call out the corruption, call out the hypocrisy. That's what I've been starting to do a little bit more. And but I think it's still so shocking to me how blatant it is this session. And maybe it's because I'm paying more attention than I ever have paid before to the session. I'm not sure, but it's so blatant. So thank you for bringing those things up. Will, you have a couple of questions.
Yes, I do. A couple of questions for Rabbi Ed. One about 481, House Bill 481, and then the second one about the anti-Antifa bill. On 481, do you think it's likely that the Senate can amend it in a way that it'll
Remind me what 481 is.
Oh, that's the anti-protest bill.
Oh, that's the critical infrastructure.
Yes, that's right,
Yeah.
critical infrastructure bill. So
Yeah.
do you think that that could be amended in a way that it would be less onerous? Or do you think that if it passes the way it is now, do you think that a challenge, for example, by the ACLU in the courts might be able to knock it down?
So let me explain what this bill is first, because maybe not everybody knows. So this is a bill that has been introduced in a lot of states. It's written by the Koch brothers and the oil and gas industry. And its intention, it's arisen after Standing Rock. And so what it wants to do is intimidate people who might want to protest oil and gas facilities and pipelines. And so we already have a law that if you interfere with an oil and gas facility such that so that you cause a stoppage of in a pipeline or something, you're subject to up to 20 years in prison. That's existing law. But this law goes much further. First, it raises it to 30 years in prison. And more important, it doesn't require that you actually interfere with the operation. All you have to do is deface or tamper in any way. So if there were protesters near a pipeline and they spray painted on a wall something that would cost $50 to fix, they're looking at 30 years in prison. And if they're part of an organization, the organization can be fined $1.5 million. And it even landowners, so a lot of our critical infrastructure, like pipelines and stuff, runs through private land in Montana. And if a landowner were to invite you onto his land to protest a pipeline that goes there, or maybe you're there because there's a Native American a burial ground that you think ought to be preserved, the landowner can also be prosecuted. It's a draconian bill, and it has passed in most Republican states. It was so greased. I do believe that there are constitutional problems with it, but I'm not sure how they get raised, because it first have to be a protest and somebody have to be willing to risk 30 years in prison in order to challenge the law. In Montana, it was so unnecessary because we already had this very, very strict law. If you but you had to actually cause a disruption in services. By the way, it defines critical infrastructure to also include prisons. So if a prisoner were to write, Will was here 2021 on his cell wall, he could now be looking at 30 years for defacing critical infrastructure. It is maybe the most draconian bill of the session, unless you count some of the abortion bills. And in North Dakota, it was declared unconstitutional by a federal court there. But you have to, as you know, in order to challenge a bill's constitutionality, you first have to have somebody who has been impacted by it. And the whole point of this bill is to terrify people into not protesting because the penalties are so draconian. The other one, what was the other bill you asked about?
Well, the anti-Antifa bill, just on a lighter subject, I just was curious how you happened to kill it, because I mean, it was so, ridiculous a bill, but on the other hand, applying common sense doesn't always work in our.
No, it never works. So what happened was this young 20-year-old extremist from north part of the state introduced this bill. It's the same bill that was introduced by Ted Cruz in the United States Senate, but after they held a hearing, they found that nothing in it was true, so it never went anywhere. But nevertheless, he introduced it, and so he had 55 Republican co-sponsors out of 100. So that seems like a pretty greased bill, right? And he presented it to. He had no witnesses, and it's all about he's got some allegations by some far-right people in Oregon who say that they were harassed by Antifa, and that's the whole bill. And so then I get to ask him some questions. One of the challenges, you only get 2 or 3 questions. If you're lucky, 3. So my question to him was, Representative, I really want to thank you for bringing a bill that calls attention to domestic terrorism, because domestic terrorism is indeed a real problem in this country. And I'm so appreciative of you doing that. But I'm curious because in 2020, the Department of Homeland Security issued a report on domestic terrorism in the United States. And in it, they concluded that white supremacists and neo-Nazis are the problem. And that in the entire report, it's 28 pages, I did a Google search, I did a search on it, and the word Antifa is never mentioned. And moreover, we have white supremacists in Whitefish in 2018 terrorizing the Jewish community, which is just a few miles from your home. So my question then is, I'm curious why you chose to condemn Antifa and not the people who our Department of Homeland Security says are the real problem. And of course, he hemmed and hawed. Within an hour, 33 of the 55 co-sponsors had withdrawn their name. It's a small victory, but it was, and even Representative Usher, who's the chair of the committee. Now, Representative Usher, he was a little concerned about the time that Homeland Security made this finding. Fortunately, it was during Trump's presidency. Had it been during Biden's, he probably would have been dismissive of it. So that was my probably the high point of my first 2 months, even though it derailed a meaningless resolution, but you take your wins where you can get them.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ed.
Yeah.
So don't be shy. Anyone else who has questions, feel free to either post them in the chat or raise your hand. Deb wanted to know if anyone has defined what virtual critical infrastructure is.
Yeah, the bill defines it.
Yeah.
It's very detailed. It's basically a lot of oil and gas facilities, electrical facilities, but also prisons. It's very broad.
But those are the physical critical infrastructures. It says physical critical infrastructures, and then it ad nauseum define those, but it also says and virtual critical infrastructures. So my question was, I mean, there's a lot of nebulous language in there, but what is a virtual critical infrastructure? Well, and I understand physical, but so we were trying to get Donovan Hott to get some amendments in about the nebulous language, but we didn't quite make it. Northern Plains and I were working together on that. So we're coming back at the Senate. We'll see.
Yeah, I don't know if if there's going to be an appetite to amend it in the Senate or not. It's these bills that come from ALEC, which is the right-wing think tank, are the Republicans generally don't even understand them. They just know they're supposed to vote for them.
Right.
And so, and then there's always this question of whether you try to amend a bad bill. If you amend it, you may, if it's as bad as we think it is, maybe the courts will strike it down. If you amend it and make it better, even a little bit, it's still terrible, but it might be upheld by the courts. So, it's always, on the abortion bills is a good example of that, where we didn't want to amend it and make it better because we think the courts will strike them all down.
So here's a question. Is it worth a big fight in the Senate? Our plan was to go after putting landowners together because that seemed to be the one area that the Republicans paid attention to.
I think it is worth it.
Okay.
Not to amend it in the Senate, but to go after it. The landowner, I tried to point out that landowner language, and this happens a lot where you say, look, it says right here that landowners are responsible, and they say, no, it doesn't. And you could say, well, but it says it right here, and they say,
yeah,
no, it doesn't.
Exactly.
and this is another piece of surprising stuff is it doesn't matter what's real and what's not.
Yeah.
Right? They have
Yeah.
their and they don't understand. I guarantee you that the great majority of Republicans don't understand what that issue is about at all. They just know that this is an ALEC bill that's supposed to vote.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Yeah.
template's right online. So, okay, we'll go for a kill rather than amendments. Okay, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So another question. The voter suppression bills moving through our legislature are copies of hundreds of nationwide bills. Can you speak to the importance of passing national legislation to protect voting rights? Maybe Kelly, if you want to take that.
Oh, please. Thank you, Allison. Much like Rabbi Ed was just talking about with the cookie cutter bill that comes from other states, poured out of a think tank and brought by a state legislature to kind of set a mandate across the nation for how something works. We saw quite a few voter suppression bills through state admin committee this cycle, and it was very clear that some of them, no matter what happened, had to pass. Like it was just, I believe we voted one down through vigorous conversation with our committee. It was HB 176 that would end same-day voter registration. And we had a great discussion and voted it down. And the next time we met, it was resurrected and a tiny amendment put on and passed to justify the passing of it. There's some really top-down orders coming in on some of these bills, and it's really disturbing to see them fly through. To your question, Julia, we really need some nationwide voter protections now. The most ridiculous thing ever was repealing the Voting Rights Act, 5 or 6 years ago, saying it wasn't necessary and that, the racial suppression of votes is over. That was nonsense. It just happened to have the right Senate makeup to pass that last time. So it's clear that because they can't suppress votes on the nationwide level, they're putting these bills into state legislatures to prevent people from voting. There's never been an issue of fraud, and all of these bills address potential fraud, which, if it was so prevalent, we would have seen it by now, 10 or 20 years. In the case of the same-day voter registration, it was approved in 2005. We've been doing it for 16 years. And it's beloved. And we even had a referendum, I think, in 15 to decide if we wanted to keep it. And we said yes. 58% of us said yes. So it's clearly not to help people vote, all these bills that we see getting passed. It's to prevent people from voting, even though it's their right. So at every level of government, we have to fight against the silencing of the people. And in our state government, we're doing the best we can with our numbers. So yeah, urge your federal legislators to pass protections for voters. Thank you.
Awesome, great question. There was one example recently that was covered in the Bozeman Daily Chronicle about a man who actually did try to commit voter fraud, but he was caught because the system works. Because it already works. So it's just like, it just reiterates that. Elizabeth.
So Kelly, this is a follow-up, and thank you for taking this question. Do you think that there's any acceptance of the fact on the Republican side that they won the last election, and they won it because a ballot was in the hands of every single person who had registered to vote? Is there any, do they get that argument at all? And do you think it's ideology if they don't?
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's been discussed in our committees. It gets forgotten when they're pushing like one of these boilerplate template bills. It gets forgotten, but I had a bill to make all mail ballots postage paid from here on out. And it was definitely brought up during that hearing that, hey, a Republican might, I think, said, hey, we had record voter turnout and we won hard. And this was the first election that all those ballots were postage paid. But that's as far as it went, just acknowledging that, but not really acting on it. So I think it's a selective memory thing. Depends on what the word is coming down the chain on whether this needs passed or not. Is my estimate of that. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank
All right. Any other questions? I can think of a couple, but I don't want to be the only one asking. So in thinking about you both serve in the House. So you've seen a lot of these bills that are, very discriminatory, or they limit voter access, or, all the things that we've kind of been talking about. Those move to the Senate now. Do you have any sense of what bills are coming from the Senate to your committees now, or is that something that you'll figure out on Monday or Tuesday?
So mostly it's something we'll figure out on Tuesday. I mean, this break is so needed. I know one bill that's coming that I've been thinking about a lot, and that is the Religious Restoration Act, or it's not quite the name, but it's like that. And what it says is that if you have a deeply held religious belief in something, that a state law cannot apply to you unless it serves a compelling state interest, whatever that is. The goal of the bill is to allow people to discriminate against LGBT people, but it's really much more far-reaching than that. And I think there are some interesting implications. For example, Judaism has always believed that abortion is permitted in most circumstances. And so there's a bill that they just passed that would ban abortion after 20 weeks. And if a Jewish woman has a deeply held religious belief that she should be able to have an abortion after 20 weeks, can that abortion state law apply to her? There's all sorts of interest. Every state law is up for grabs if you object because you have a religious reason. And so it's another one of these bills that's coming from the right-wing think tanks, and it's really an outgrowth of the whole baking a cake for the gay wedding couple. But the implications are quite broad, and so we'll be exploring that. I know that's a biggie. Another bill that actually, so not all bills get transmitted at this time. There are some bills that, if they have revenue, for example, that they're still in the House. And there's others that also are not subject to that deadline. So one of the bills that passed through my committee on party line vote was the Personhood Amendment, which would declare a fertilized egg as a person with equal rights to anybody else. And that bill has not yet hit the House floor, I don't believe. Has it, Kelly? No, I think it has a later transmittal date. So that one is, and that would be, so one of their strategies is to get these really radical right-wing bills as on the ballot to turn out their supporters. So there's at least one abortion bill, and then this Personhood Amendment that they want to get on the ballot to get out all the anti-abortion people to vote. So I know that's one that we still have that's left over. I saw a couple of the Senate bills, but frankly, it's hard to work more than 1 or 2 days ahead because there's just so much coming at you so fast.
Yeah, which I think is also part of the point that the rush that we saw towards the end, in particular, was such bad government at work, because how are any of you supposed to know the merits of the bills that you're seeing when they're coming just rapid fire at you?
So I had so I said I'm on 2 major committees. I'm also on a third one called legislative administration, but that only meets occasionally when it's called. There were actually times when all three of my committees were meeting at the same time. And one of them was hearing 21 bills, another one was hearing 14 bills, the other one's only hearing a couple of bills. And so what I have to do, I can't obviously be at three places at the same time. So I have to rely on, I stayed in judiciary all that time, and I relied a lot on Alice Buckley, who's in Health and Human Services with me, to tell me what went on there. But I don't get to ask questions, and I don't really get full consideration. And when you got 21 bills coming through in 3 hours, so my death penalty bill was filed way early, and it was supposed to have a hearing way early. My abolish the death penalty, but it got postponed to make room for the Personhood Amendment, and it got put in that last week, where I got a total of an hour to present witnesses and make my point about why we should abolish the death penalty. It was ridiculous. I had about 5 minutes total talking time I was allowed. And so they pushed a lot of the Democrat bill. If it's a Democrat filed it, they pushed it into that last week, and they just run through them one after the next, and they give 5-10 minutes a bill sometimes. And from the perspective of the Republican leadership, why not? You're going to beat them. You're going to vote against them anyway. Why waste a lot of time hearing stuff that's already doomed?
To that point, Ed, you recall early before the session started, they were trying to change the rules to allow the committee chair to just kill a bill and give it no hearing. And that's the same kind of intention, I think, we're seeing here in packing all these bills into such a tight time. So it's clear that they, with the numbers this way, they don't really feel compelled to even listen to us on some of our ideas that would help the state.
Yeah, decorum seems to have vanished at certain times as well. There's been conversations about that as well, and the fairness and the treatment of the minority party by the majority party. But I think one of the things that I'm curious to hear from both of you about is working with some of the moderate Republicans, or if there's been any opportunity for that, if you've, as a caucus, been able to get something good through or kill something because of a strategy that brings more to more votes to one side or the other, and if you can talk about that at all.
So we have on a few occasions been able to work with the moderate Republicans, and generally that happens through our leadership, who works with their leadership. And then it's trickle down sort of thing. One of the many things that has made this session so difficult is COVID. And so personally, I was participating remotely until the last couple of weeks when I've been live. And what that means is you can't make any relationships with Republicans because you're not there. And nobody's got time to talk on the phone or whatever after you start at 7 a.m, you're going to 9 or 10 at night, and there's no time for making relationships over the phone if that was even possible. And so one of the things that Tom Woods has explained to me that this is so different than anything he's ever seen, because all of the usual cocktail parties and lobbyists throw events, and that's where you can really talk to people and work together as individuals. But that's just not been a possibility this session. Together with the fact that we're so outnumbered that they don't really see any need to work with us. Only occasionally. So we did defeat, for example, recently, a bill that would have made judicial elections partisan. You'd have to run as an R or a D. And we managed to defeat that by working with moderate Republicans, and just barely defeated it by a few votes. And I can't recall, but one of the anti-vax bills we defeated like that as well. But it's 5 or 10 bills total we've been able to do that on. And maybe Kelly's had a different experience, but it rarely comes from, except at the level of leadership.
I would agree with you on that, Rabbi Ed. There's a couple of issues that kind of I think bind us together even before the leadership gets involved. Like I think the big win for our union folks on Monday was I think a lot of that was outside of us. I think that the unions kind of got their people in every little corner of Montana to write their representatives to defend their right to unionize and negotiate. And I would say a huge portion of that was the people, not necessarily the legislators, just listening to our constituents. So I think it was a pretty resounding win too, like 38, 62 or something like that. So yeah, but most of the time, yes, I would agree with you that most of it comes with some thoughtful planning by the folks that talk to the folks.
Well, I think on the right to work bill, my guess is that Governor Gianforte didn't want it on his desk. That the irony is that a lot of these guys, so this doesn't affect public unions, it's only private unions, which is mostly electricians and plumbers and factory workers and so on. And a lot of those people are Republicans. And I think, I would have never said this before the session, but compared to the legislature, Governor Gianforte is quite moderate. And I don't think he wanted that bill. And I think he let it be known that he didn't want that bill. Why alienate Republican voters? And we have a legislator who's very far right, but who's probably, I hear, may be running against Senator Tester next time. He voted against it. He knows, why is he, why do they want to alienate these blue collar workers who have become in large part of the Republican base? So I think that bill has a strange dynamic to it.
That's an interesting observation, but whatever the reason, I'm glad it happened. Like, we'll take it. We'll take it. Any other questions? Anyone has thought of anything? Raise your hand or unmute or.
I got one here, Allison.
Yeah.
Can same-day voter registration be salvaged in the second half of the legislature? Yes. For most of these bills, most of them haven't gone through both chambers yet. I see the hearing for HB 176 and the Senate happened on the 15th of February, but there's been no vote on it yet. So absolutely, the people can reach out to their senators and tell them to save same-day voter registration. There's no reason to remove it. It's been working awesome for Montana. So absolutely, get involved, let your senators know, and scream about it on your social media too.
Yeah.
And so if I could follow up on that, just in terms of citizen involvement. So we get so many emails and texts and so on. There's no way we could humanly read all of them. And I can tell you, when I get a form one, that's obviously a form letter that somebody put their name, it gets deleted right away. But if I get one that's not a form and it's from Gallatin County, I'm going to read it for sure. So I think that is important, but don't use forms, and call instead of write if you can, more effective. But the thing we really need, we have to, even with, if every Democrat in Gallatin County were to start contacting their legislators more, I think it'd make a negligible difference. Where I think we need to be putting our effort is be looking a little bit more long-term. And we need to take back those swing districts that we lost. And in Gallatin County, 64, where Jane Gillette won, is clearly one of them. And there's a bunch in Billings, there's a bunch in Great Falls. And unless we can get more Democrats elected, we're not going to be able to stop any of this stuff. I mean, not, or 95% of it, we're not going to be able to stop. I think if for people who want to get involved and care about these issues, I'd say, yeah, sure, if you've got time, write your representative or call them. But we need to start thinking about how we're going to win back those seats. that's going to make the only thing we can really do to make a difference.
Just a clarifying question, Rabbi Ed. When you say form, you mean like the Sierra Club or someone else sends you a form letter and you sign the thing? You don't mean the form that we use in the contact us form for the legislature. Is that right?
No, what I mean is you get an email and it's a cut and paste that some organization has sent you a cut and paste, and you just cut and paste it and put your name on it. And you could see, because you got 50 emails that are all exactly the same, except for the signature.
So how does, when we go to the contact us page on the Montana Legislature, how does that come across? Does it come across in your regular email?
So every legislator gets to choose how they receive that. So some people, it actually comes onto their desk as printed out notes, which, by the way, is something I want to work on for next session. Is the amount of waste of paper there is mind-blowing. And that that's not all electronic is just mind-blowing. In my case, I choose to get all mine by email.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay, really curious,
so,
thanks.
And then generally speaking, I respond to everybody from Gallatin County personally. And if they're not from Gallatin County, I just note that I've got something and I move on. I don't know what Kelly does.
It makes total sense.
My method's the same, Rabbi Ed. I get all of my stuff electronically. I even look up the bill drafts online.
Uh-oh.
Oh, looks like we lost him. We need better broadband in Montana. Look at that. That's a prime example of this. Well, I do know that Kelly does respond to constituents from Gallatin County, just like Rabbi Ed was saying. Yeah, in fact, I've gotten letter or responses from Kelly, which is kind of fun. Well, we just have a few minutes left. And so if there's any other pressing questions or anything, yeah, and Kelly also sends a weekly newsletter, so you can subscribe to that too. And he always talks about his bills that he's got moving forward, which that also takes a lot of time. And towards the end, he got a little overwhelmed and didn't get one out one weekend, but he's doing pretty good keeping up with his constituents and everyone. So that's an amazing service that he's doing. Oh, okay. So this is a good question. Just to clarify, do you get a tally of how many yay or nay comments have been sent?
Nobody adds it up for us, but it's pretty obvious. In most cases, you tend to get a lot from one side and very few from the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I would say, like, one of the things just to remember is that, there is still the opportunity to try and weigh in the second half of the session and influence on some of these more egregious bills. I think House Bill 176, for example, the same day voter registration one, that's a good one for us to, put a little bit more effort in to try and kill in the Senate, because there's less people we need to influence in the Senate than we did in the House. And so maybe there's an opportunity there. But I think Rabbi Ed is also correct that this is also about what comes next and holding the Republicans accountable for their bad votes and bad bills and recruiting people to run in those districts and actually having the conversations. In Gallatin County, for example, we did have an opponent or, a Democrat challenge everyone except for our House District 69, which is the one that Jennifer Carlson ran or represents now. And so, I personally want to make sure that a Democrat's running in every race in 2022 in Gallatin County. And I think that should be a goal of everyone's. Yes, and that's a good point, Mindy, which I'll talk about in a second. So anyway, it just there's there's opportunity and we need to be remembering what's happening. I'm actually keeping track of all the bills that we've been watching, thanks to some help from some of our other volunteers. And, you know, like we're not going to forget these really terrible, egregious bills or these bad votes or these bad statements that are made on the House floor and elsewhere. So another resource just to follow, if you don't already know, is the Montana Free Press. And you can, they've done a really good job of like reformatting the legislative website to make it more user-friendly for us. That's really what they've done. And I've seen a lot of great reporting come out of them too, with graphics and analytics as well. They did an analysis of how many bills actually were heard in the last 2 weeks compared to previous sessions, and it's kind of mind-boggling. The Judiciary Committee in particular, Rabbi Ed, was quite overwhelming to see that graph. So, well, it is about 6:30. Are there any other questions or thoughts or concerns? Kelly's come back in. And if not, that's okay. We can all go and enjoy our weekend. So last question then, what are you going to do for the next couple of days to keep to take this break and not be engaged in the session? What are you doing for yourself?
Well, at the moment, I'm in Jackson Hole, and I was cross-country skiing all day, and we'll be here tomorrow with my wife. And I skied Bridger on Wednesday. It was very funny, actually, because I normally don't like to ski by myself, but on Wednesday I skied Bridger by myself, and I was so thankful not to have anybody else around me. Just to get away from the mobs. And and I'm basically, tomorrow we're driving back to Bozeman, and Sunday I'm going to go for a walk with a friend and do that kind of thing. And then come Monday morning, first thing, I'm going to I'll be looking at the Senate bills that are coming our way. And by Monday I have to be back in Helena by 5 is our first meeting. So it's a great break. I'm so thankful to have had it. It's and it helps keep sane a little bit, but it's going to start right up again very soon.
Yeah, thank you. Kelly?
I have been relaxing since we got done Tuesday night. Staying at home, ordering pizza, spending time with my spouse. We haven't got to see each other in 2 weeks despite living in the same house. It's just been so busy. So yeah, I've been taking a break, and now I think tomorrow I'm going to start looking at bills, and I put off 700 emails these last 2 crazy weeks. So I have some work to do this weekend to prep for Monday and start this all over again.
Well, we're very appreciative of the work that you've been doing and your perseverance, and also taking the time to be with us tonight and, on our live streams that we're doing every week when you can join us. Keeping us all informed of what's going on and sharing your perspective is so helpful. And we're all very grateful for you. And to everyone who joined tonight, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your questions. Thanks for being engaged. And we will see you soon. And in the meantime, enjoy the beautiful Montana weather that we're having this week. But pray for more snow, because we do need more snow. I'm just going to say that too. So anyway, thank you all and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.